Alright, welcome everybody to First Attack. I am James Chen, coming at you after an exciting weekend of Street Fighter action. Hang on a second, I am having some technical difficulties here. Can everybody hear me just fine? Just making sure, because my headphones sound kind of odd. Well, I'll wait till some people respond, but yes! Today on First Attack, I am going to be going over a topic that someone actually asked me an Ask jchensor question that I felt like I should dedicate to a full episode as opposed to just answering it real quick. And the main topic that I want to talk about today is something that's really important that comes up a lot in every fighting game, and it's something that I think players who've become very good at Street Fighter start taking for granted. As just a natural skill that you start picking up after a while, and that's meter management. A lot of the times whenever you hear me and David commentate, certain times people will use meters in matches and we'll just be like, oh, I don't agree with that. I don't think you should have did that. Or, someone will use a meter to kill someone off and, I'll be like, oh, you know what? I think he could have saved that meter for something else. And David would be like, oh, I think it was cool because he needed to kill the character off and such. But that's because there's this whole second layer of game on top of the main game, which is this concept of meter management. So, what is meter management exactly? The thing about fighting games is a lot of the times people who don't quite understand fighting games or who are just getting into fighting games, obviously the first thing they're going to pay attention to is your life meter, right? You're going to look at your life meter and you're going to be like, okay, I need to make sure my character doesn't die. And you pay attention to this life bar, and everything is about this life meter. Do as much damage as possible, keep myself from getting any damage, and then, that's going to be the key to victory. But, it's really kind of interesting. I remember having a conversation with Gutex in Vanilla, or it was around Vanilla SF4, Super SF4 period of time, where, he was actually saying to me that he's starting to truly believe that the life meter wasn't the most important thing in Street Fighter 4, and it actually turned out to be the super meter was the most important thing. And, in a lot of ways, I agree with that. Street Fighter 4, probably not as much as some other games when it comes to meter management on how important it is, but there is definitely a strong case to be made that life and meter are equally as important, because the one thing that super meter does is it's a limited resource, and that's the main thing to understand about super meter, is that it's a limited resource. See, the beautiful thing about a fighting game is that when you actually play a fighting game, there's no experience. You don't gain more magic points as you level up or whatever like that. You don't gain extra health points. Everything you have is right there from the beginning. There's nobody who's going to jump in and play Ryu who has an advantage over your Ryu, because no matter what, you start out the same. And so you always have access to fireballs, uppercuts, all of your normal moves, your throws, any skill that that a character has, you always have. The only caveat to that is super meter. And because it's a limited resource, you have to learn how to use it properly. Now, I actually saw someone in the chat right when I started talking about meter management. He said that whenever he plays the game, he just blows everything on EX fireballs and FADC uppercuts right away. And and that's actually a tendency, whether he's a little bit trolling comment, but that is a natural tendency for people to do. Whenever they get meter, they just spend it right away because they're like, oh, I have meter, I'm going to use it. And so the one thing that is going to take you to the next level is to be able to think about your meter and think about how that's going to affect the match. And so the most important part of this, so when it comes to managing meter, there's 4 main factors that you really want to think about when considering how to use your meter. Actually, let me do one thing here. There's 4 main factors and a lot of minor factors involved as well. But let's talk about the 4 main factors. So the first one is, of course, this is the obvious one. How much super meter do you have? If you have no super meter, you can't use it, right? And if you have a ton of super meter, that actually gives you more access to options. So let's just say you're playing a match here with Ryu, and you're playing against an opponent and you are severely down on life right now. You have about 10% of life and the opponent has about 50% of life. The question now comes down to, how can you actually fight your opponent? The meter gives you access to so many important things. You get EX Fireball. In fact, let me do something really quick here. There's not really much I can demonstrate on the actual game itself, but I'm gonna bring it up anyway, just so you guys can see some little minor examples of this. And I'm gonna put it on the smaller screen right now. Oops, and nothing else apparently. Let's do this. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna put the smaller screen here because it's not really that important to see what's going on in there. But with Ryu, Super Meter is super important for him because it gives him access to a lot of tools and weapons that he otherwise does not have. And let's talk about what some of those tools might be. Probably the most important tool that Ryu has is the EX Fireball, because the EX Fireball is such a momentum changer and it's a knockdown too. So that's one of the most important parts, is that, you know, in this footsie game here. Oh yeah, and also another important thing is, you notice that max distance low forward Fireball will not combo, but max distance low forward EX Fireball does combo. So there's a lot of utility to this weapon here, to this EX Fireball, that's very, very useful to have. Obviously, another very important factor that he has is the ability to FADC and uppercut in emergency situations. You know, so just in case you're knocked down and you really need to get out of the situation, you can just FADC or uppercut, backdash, and reset situations and such. You know, and so on and so forth. And also, if you have a full super meter, having access to, you know, a full super is very important as well, because you can do a large chunk of damage by one hit. So if I actually hit him with a low forward and then I can hit confirm that into the super. If I can actually do it again. For some reason I can't do it anymore. There you go. Oh, that's right. You can't throw the super fireball as long as the fireball's still on the screen. So that's why I can't do it in that situation. It has to be close enough so that the fireball is gone. Okay, so in any case, there's a lot of different utilities for use EX meter. Now, if I'm in a situation here where I'm down 10% and my opponent has 50% life, right? So he has 50% of his life, and I really want to make a comeback here. I really need to kill him. It's really going to depend on how much meter you have. If I have 1 bar of meter, if I have only 1 bar of meter, I am not going to blow it on a Footsie's EX Fireball like this. You just can't do it, because as soon as you do that, you lose your opportunity to land a way to land your Ultra combo. So let's pretend I have a full Ultra here, right? So we've all seen it before. There's this combo in the corner where you get into the Ultra. You know, shout outs to Alex, who's in the chat right now. There's always the Alex Vi where you walk up and catch him with the EX Hurricane into the Ultra, such like that, right? So having 1 bar is super important, because if I have no bar and I get my opponent in the corner like this, they are not as scared. They can play a little more recklessly, right? If I have 1 bar, all of a sudden they're that much more scared. So now here's the question is, what if I have 2 bars? Well, 2 bars gives me access to FADC Ultra, right? So that's actually super important. So if I get into a situation where I'm pressuring them mid-screen, you know, and I land, for example, a cross-up, and then I frame trap them into uppercut FADC Ultra, now I can do all this damage. So having 2 bars gives me a lot of leeway here, and based on the position that we're at, let's say Ken has me here, and I'm kind of trapped in the corner. This is a situation here where EX Fireball into Ultra or EX Tatsu into Ultra is not going to be as practical, because I'm stuck over here and I do not have the ability to land it because it's a corner only combo. So now with 2 blocks of super, I do not want to use it for the footsies. I do not want to use it for the EX Fireball footsies, because I need it to land my uppercut FADC Ultra. I need to be able to do this damage to make the comeback. Now, what if I have Ken kind of in the corner here, and I have 2 bars. See, now the situation has changed a little bit. Because I have him kind of close to the corner, and you notice if I hit him with an EX Fireball, what happens? I knock him back, and I push him a little further into the corner. Which means, now that he's further into the corner, I can land this, right? Low forward EX Fireball into Ultra. So, even based on where I am in the field, can affect how I want to use my meter. So 2 bars here, it becomes an uppercut FADC thing, and I do not want to use it for EX Fireball. But 2 meters here, all of a sudden, now I can use that as a weapon. Another situation, 3 bars. Let's say I have 3 bars now, and so I'm not in this corner situation. Well, I know now I can spend 1 bar on an EX Fireball and still get an uppercut FADC Ultra. So having different meter just lets you... I mean, basically the best way to put it is that you really have to think about how you use your meter. Because a lot of people are going to say to themselves, oh, I have 2 bars here. I'm going to do low forward EX Fireball. You've just blown your entire chance to make a comeback in that round. You've lost it now because you have no good way to land your Ultra. If I have 3 bars and I'm in the middle of the screen, maybe I don't want to do this. Because the other really powerful thing is the low forward EX Fireball into FADC into Ultra, and you can get a big amount of damage that way. Basically, what you have to consider is how many bars you have and how you're going to do your damage. You need to figure out where you're going to use that meter, because if you don't, then you're just going to blow it on something like, oh, I'm just going to try to walk up an EX Hurricane in the middle of the screen. What is this going to get you? It's going to get you nothing, right? And of course, in 4 bars, then you have situations where, you can actually do uppercut super, if you don't happen to have an Ultra and such, or more importantly, you just have more utility to EX Fireball him, EX Fireball him, EX Fireball him, and now they're closer to the corner, and then you land EX Tatsu into Ultra, and then you can kill them. So it's all about trying to figure out how to utilize that meter properly. And the thing about it is, though, that's not the only factor. Another very, very important factor is... Obviously, I kind of hinted at this. I said, what if I have 10% and what if Ken has 50%, right? Let's reverse the situation around here a little bit. Let's say I have 90% of my life and Ken has about 15% of his life left. And I'm sitting on a full bar. I'm sitting on full super meter. Obviously, if I land uppercut FADC into... Well, actually, if I have 90% life, I'm not going to have an Ultra combo unless I focused a crap ton of fireballs. Let's just pretend I did focus a bunch of fireballs. So I have half an Ultra built up. I have about 80% life. Ken is down to about 15%. If I have 3 bars, I can of course do uppercut FADC into Ultra. And that'll kill Ken off. But here's the thing though. I have enough life that I don't need to go all out and kill my opponent right away. I have about 80% life, and if Ken, for example, let's say Ken has 0 super meter and he doesn't have an Ultra, he doesn't really have a threat. He doesn't have that comeback ability, right? So I'm sitting here with a bunch of life and super meter. Now all of a sudden there becomes this fight, this balance between life and super meter. I'd rather save my super meter for the next round, whereas life resets. So instead of using all of my meter to kill him as fast as I can, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to kill him without using any meter. This is now my goal. I'm going to try killing without using any meter because I have 80% life. I can lose another 30 to 40% life, drain myself down to about 40%, and that entire time just try to land simple combos against him, and then boom, now he's dead. So I didn't need to waste all that meter, right? So if I'm going to land an uppercut on him, I'm not going to FADC it. I'm just going to let the uppercut hit, and I'm going to keep going. Because now I know in the next round, even if he gets one combo off of me because I didn't kill him right away. So I uppercut him, he doesn't die, he gets up, lands a combo on me. Doesn't matter, because that life meter is now just currency. It's just there to spend that it's just there so that I can preserve my super meter. I'm going to hit him with one more small combo. He's going to die. I'm going to start the next round with all 3 of my bars, and possibly 4 now because I've just done a few combos. And now the situation is my life is reset. I have all this meter. Now I can kill him even quicker the next round. So it's very, very important to gauge life and your super meter at the same time. The more super meter you have, the less life you have, the more you're going to be willing to blow your super meter. The more life you have, then you don't have to blow your super meter. You can save it and use it for the next round. Now, obviously this leads into the next factor, which is rounds. So the first factor is, how much super meter you have. Second factor is how much life you have. Third factor, obviously, rounds. It's I've hinted at it, save your meter for the next round, save your meter for the next round. Now, what if we're 1-1? He's won one round, I've won another round. Then it doesn't matter how much life you have, you're just going to blow everything that you have to kill them, if it's going to kill them, right? So, for example, let's just say that exact scenario comes up. I have 80% life, 3 bars. He has 15% life and no super meters of any kind. Well, I'm just going to kill him with whatever I can. I'm going to uppercut FADC Ultra him. I'm going to low forward EX, whatever I can to kill him off, because there's obviously no round coming up. And this is, I can't emphasize this enough. I don't feel like a lot of people think about rounds when they use super meter. And it's one of the most important things. And different games, it becomes more and more important. If you guys remember, there was an episode where I talked about different styles of fighting games and how each one of them can give you a different skill. And one of the skills that I talked about in King of Fighters 13 was resource management. One of the most important things about that game is resource management. In that game, you have 2 meters, right? You have the drive meter, I think it's called, and you also have the meter that allows you to do the cancels, and then you also have your super meter. And it's so important managing those meters when it comes to trying to defeat characters. And I touched upon that a little bit in that episode, how that factors in so heavily into the game. If you watch a lot of King of Fighters players, when they're new at the game, they don't meter manage properly. They'll just use their HD combos and kill people right away. And it's such a mistake, if the opponent has more characters left. Obviously that's the round system in King of Fighters. In Street Fighter, I've seen it as well, especially in Cross Tekken. Oh my gosh, Cross Tekken. It's like it's like if you want a book on poor meter management, go watch your average Cross Tekken match, because I have seen more bad meter management in that game than any other game that exists in the fighting game community right now. And a lot of times they don't take into account rounds, and since you only get 3 chunks of meter in that game, every block is way more important. And so you end up with a lot of situations where people try to spend meters to kill people off at the end of rounds where it's not going to kill them. So, you know what? They should just, honestly let it go. Just be like, what? I'm just going to let this go, save my meter for the next round, and hope to win in that case. Obviously, if there's no rounds left, you are going to spend that meter to try to take the win. Now, one of the other things that I want to talk about the rounds is it also depends on who has the wins and who doesn't. So like I said, let's say I am sitting here and nobody's won a round. If I want to save my meter because I have that 80% life, I have that gigantic lead, it's okay. It's okay. You know what? The nice thing about it is I still have 1 round to lose. So let's just say I totally screw up. I'm sitting here saving my meter, and then my opponent just gets me into some vortex situation, drains all my life. I lose that round. Now I'm down 1 round to nothing, right? So I've won 0 rounds. My opponent has won 1 round. To be honest with you, those situations, you might be willing to accept it because now you have more meter than your opponent does for the next couple of rounds. So it's okay to go ahead and suffer that. But if my opponent has 1 round and I have 0 rounds, even with that 80% life lead and let's just say my opponent's down to 15%, I'm going to start thinking about spending meter to kill them, because if I lose this round, I'm saving my meter for nothing, right? But you're thinking to yourself, well, I want to save my meter for the third round just in case. You know, this is where you have to start balancing it. If I'm up one round versus my opponent and he has no rounds, I might try to save that meter as best as possible. But if he has that one round versus me, even if I have a giant life lead, I might consider spending all my meter to kill him, because getting to the round 3 is more important than saving your meter. So even if he has 15% life, I'm just going to blow all this meter to make sure he's dead. Me and David were even making that comment yesterday during Cross Tekken. There was a couple of times where someone spent a meter to make sure someone died to get to the next round. And, you know, I was like, well, there wasn't much time left. And David was like, no, you know what? I'd rather him get the kill. And that is definitely a factor to consider when you're thinking about meter management. You know, getting to the next round with the win sometimes can be more important than preserving your meter. Before I get into the fourth component, I'm going to run a commercial real quick. I'm going to take a break, so I will be right back, guys. Give me 1 second. Alright guys, welcome back to First Attack, and I'm talking a little bit about meter management. I just went over 3 main things to consider when you're thinking about meter management, and those 3 things that I talked about are the super meter itself. Obviously, if you have very little meter left, you're going to want to try to conserve it as best as possible. If you have a bunch of meter in store, then you can go ahead and just use it on occasional EX fireballs like this, just to get the knockdown or shift momentum. Second main thing is to take into account how much life you have. If I'm winning with a perfect and my opponent has 10% and I have 1 bar of super, I'm not going to blow that super to try to kill him. I'm going to try to kill him in every way possible without using my meter to save it for the next round. The third thing that I talked about was the number of rounds won, and how many, basically who has an advantage in rounds. If nobody's had any rounds win, you can kind of play a little bit more risky by not spending meter. If you're down a round, you don't want to risk as much. You know, if you're up a round, then you can play even more lax, you know, and try to conserve meter as much as possible. Because if you conserve meter, and then even if you lose and you have 4 bars, and then you start the third round by hitting them with the super combo, it's pretty demoralizing sometimes to the opponent to start off the round with such little life. So that's the third factor, and I want to talk about the fourth main factor that you want to consider when trying to manage your meter, and that's actually the timer on the clock. This is actually something really, really important. And during the reason why it's important, a lot of people probably don't think about this, is I've also seen a lot of situations where people are so obsessed with meter management, they sit on their meter and they don't use it at all, and they don't do anything with it, right? What happens in this situation where you sit on your meter is that if you're at 99 seconds, let's say you're at 90 seconds, you start round 2 and you have a full super meter there. At 90 seconds, you're probably going to be able just to blow your meter as much as you want, like at first, like little chunks of it. I'm just going to throw an EX Fireball here. You know what? I'm going to do, for example, EX Hurricane just because I need to get him away from me or something like that. You're going to be willing to do that because during the course of the match, you're going to build up more bars as you go. So if you're sitting on a full super meter like this, some people actually, you know, they make it a point to themselves that if they have a full super meter, they'll purposely use one right away in a really useful utility situation, just so they are always building something during the course of the next round. If you don't actually spend that meter, then everything you're doing here, and I'm landing all this cool stuff and landing all these combos, you're kind of essentially wasting meter if you think about it, because that's meter you could be building and that you're not building. So, you know, in these kind of situations, I'll throw an EX Fireball, I hit him, Even if he blocks it, I get better frame advantage after an EX Fireball, and then I land my combo, and during that whole time I'm building meter. So that's also something really important to think about, is timer-wise. So let's say I have a 90% life lead, and my opponent is down to, 10%, and the clock is at 30%. I'm not going to blow my meter in that situation because the round is almost over, right? I'm going to get to the next round. So I'm not going to bother spending that meter there. Instead, what I'm going to do is hold on to it. But if it's 90 seconds, I'm just going to burn it, and then there's plenty of chance for me to, just build more meter by blocking things, by just whiffing uppercuts and such. So, it's definitely something to consider, is the timer. And, this is super important in King of Fighters, again, because King of Fighters, like I said, is the ultimate resource game. When you look at your HD meter especially, you've got two halves of it. It allows you to do so much more damage when you use one of those things. And so if you find yourself in the situation where you have enough time to build up a bunch more meter. So let's just say you're fighting your opponent. He has 2 characters left. You're down to 1 character. If you spend your meter for 1/2 of that to do an HD cancel, so to do a cancel, and then you end up getting a good chunk of damage on the opponent, and then you have a little bit more time in the round to fight him and build up more meter, it's totally worth it. But let's just say the meter, the time is down to very little. If you spend the meter there, and then it gets to the next round, you have not had enough time to build up any super meter, and now you're going into the last match resource starved. Best way to make a comeback in that game is to land a full HD combo, so you don't want to be spending that meter if you're about to get to the next round right away. So that is the 4 main things that I think are important for meter management, 4 most important factors. Now, I did mention a little bit that there's some secondary factors that you want to think about with meter as well, and this is like the 3rd level of meter management. So obviously just managing resources is a very important thing, and some people are just going to be naturally better at than others, and it's really funny too, because it's actually one of my favorite things to watch when I watch fighting games, is how people use their meter. Some people are willing to spend meter right away. They just blow it out right away, and other people kind of hoard meter. And I bet you that's actually a very strong indication of how they behave in real life too, with finances and other such things. There's the kind of people out there that love to save their favorite foods. They don't want to eat everything right away, and they try to savor it. And then there's other people who are like, this food is so good, I'm just going to eat it in like 3 seconds. Meter is kind of the same way, and it's kind of fun to see that. But there are a lot of little extra factors that are going into there that you should consider outside of just, when to use it and such. And the first major factor that I have here is the threat factor. So let me go to, for example, Cammy here. I'm going to go to Cammy, obviously because I know her best. Let's do this. And I'm going to be playing against the Ryu here. So, what do I mean by threat factor? Well, there are certain situations that the EX meter gives you that's super valuable to have. The most obvious one here is, for Cammy, is that if I have meter, I can go through a fireball with an EX drill. Now, because I have this ability to go through this EX drill, I may get Ryu scared, because now that gets me the knockdown and I'm in. If Ryu is doing a great job keeping me away right here, and I get this EX drill, I can win an entire round based off of just that knockdown, because we've all seen the power of Cammy's Vortex, right? So now that comes down to, maybe there are some situations where I have 1 bar, I have 1 super meter, and Ryu is fighting me, and I have 15% life, and he has 75% life, right? For the sake of Cammy, I mean, obviously with Cammy, if he throws a fireball and I EX drill, I can win a whole round off of it. But there are some situations where maybe you don't want to use the meter right away and try to figure out a way to whittle your opponent down a little bit more so that you only need one mix-up. If I EX drill through a fireball, I have to count on getting 2 mix-ups to be able to kill Ryu, right? And so I'm going to save my meter, because if I spend my meter and then I try to do a mix-up and Ryu somehow blocks it, gets away, I'm now sitting on 0 meter, and now he can throw fireballs at me like crazy. So I've used that meter, and I have no resources left. So now all of a sudden, it just completely opens up Ryu's fireball game to me, and it's going to be that much harder to beat him. So instead, I'm going to save my meter. I'm going to try to get in once and get a good damage combo, go for a mix-up, and then if he pushes me back out, guess what? I still have that meter. So I still have the ability to EX drill through the fireball and start a mix-up game and win, potentially, off of that. Now, a lot of people are saying, what's the difference between using it then and using it now? And it's because with that meter, I am severely limiting one of Ryu's best tactics. I am taking away an option from him, and he's scared. You know, obviously, if he knew I wasn't going to EX drill through a fireball, the Ryu player might pick up on that and just start chucking fireballs a lot more, kind of baiting you or forcing you into using the drill. But if the Ryu doesn't notice that you're kind of purposely sitting on it and just using the meter as a threat factor, that can shut down his game. You can get in a lot more easier, get a combo going, and then you can use the meter later on in the round when you only need one more mix-up to kill him. And that's really important. The threat factor is really good. Having 2 meters in this game, another huge threat factor, because as long as I have 2 meters, you have the ability to uppercut FADC, right? So now you're super scared of uppercuts, right? So in other words, if I land this kind of thing and I try to frame trap you, you know, and I'm going to be able to get this huge damage off you, having those 2 meters there will get my opponent scared. He'll be like, okay, you know what, I'm scared of the uppercut. So you can get a chance to land a couple of throws on him. You see Vi do this all the time. I want you guys to watch his Ryu matches. Whenever he has a meter, Vi has that reputation now for EX Tatsu into Ultra in the corner. So a lot of the times you'll see him, when he gets into that position, he goes for the throw. Because of the threat of that meter, he's going to land a throw. And now the opponent is still scared, so he lands another throw. And the opponent is still scared, and he lands another throw. And then the opponent's still scared, but now he's gotten thrown 3 times, and then he does the EX Tatsu into Ultra, and he hits you. And that's all because he sat on that meter. If he went for the EX Tatsu right away, even if he connected it into Ultra, the opponent still has that little chunk of life left that he needs to drain, and he doesn't have that threat factor anymore. By sitting on that meter and getting those 3 throws, because of the meter that he's sitting on, he could drain that life easier and then land EX Tatsu into Ultra, and that will kill them off. So the threat factor is a huge thing for meter. You know, this is even the case in games like Marvel, right? So, you know, if an opponent has a level 3, sometimes it's good to sit on a level 3, because now your opponent is scared to do some stuff because they know that you can level 3 right through it and such. So you're going to limit your own options. You're not going to do a lot of stuff because you're scared that, for example, to throw a projectile from a screen away, because Zero's just going to throw the big giant level 3 projectile at you and kill you for that. You know, you're going to be scared to... Okay, here's another great one, right? You're going to be scared to call an assist because your opponent has 4 meters and you know he can DHC into a storm hail, into a hailstorm with storm. So these are things you got to consider with that meter. And so sometimes if you sit on that meter, it can be very, very advantageous for you. Okay, so the other kind of minor, the secondary factor that I want to talk about is the killing blow. And you'll see this a lot in fighting games, where sometimes, like we saw this a lot actually yesterday with Justin and Ricky. Oh no, it wasn't Ricky. It was mostly just Justin when he was using Rufus. There were times that he landed the... Here, let me switch to Rufus. There are a lot of times that he landed situations where he could have just comboed into Ultra with Rufus. And, you know, having the ultra sitting around is not a threat with Rufus, right? You're not going to just random ultra through fireballs and stuff like that. It's not necessarily, you know, it's not necessarily a factor in just random gameplay. Like Cammy having an ultra, you can ultra through a fireball. Rufus sitting on ultra, not that important. And there's a couple of times that you saw Justin land, you know, like in the corner, for example. He just landed short into Fierce into Galactic Tornado. And then instead, he didn't do the ultra. You know, did I get that? He didn't bother going into the combo here. Instead, he let the opponent drop. And he came back down and started doing dive kick shenanigans. And he was down a lot in life. You know, he was maybe 10% and the opponent had about 80% and such. So why didn't he do this? So let's logically think about it. Justin made a comeback on Snake Eyes where he did this into Fierce, and then he didn't do anything and he walked up and he landed another one. And then after that, he did do the Ultra. So he did one small combo and then a large combo into Ultra. And that killed Snake Eyes. Now, if he had done that big combo first, and then landed the small combo, he still would have died, right? Still would have killed Snake Eyes. So the question is, why would he save his Ultra meter? Why is he saving his Ultra meter when, you know, his Ultra is not going to be a utility Ultra? There's no threat factor inherently by the Ultra itself. So why in the world would Justin not just go for the Ultra right away? Why does he insist on using it basically when it's going to kill or give him the life lead? And the main reason for that is because the opponent knows you have it. The fact that they know you have it will make them play more tentative, make them play a little more worried. So even though small combo plus big combo or big combo plus small combo equals the same amount of damage, through a mental standpoint, through a psychology standpoint, it's very different. Landing a small combo and then going for mix-ups, now your opponent is still scared. Even if I get them in the middle of the screen, they're still thinking about, oh, that, you know, and I'm going to, oops, here. They're thinking about, oh, good stuff. They're thinking about this, right? And so because of that, they're going to play more tentative. They're scared of getting hit by a dive kick. If the first combo I did and I went to the Ultra, now all of a sudden I have no Ultra, they're thinking to themselves, oh, if I get hit by a dive kick, I'm not necessarily going to die, so they're going to play this little bit more recklessly. So it was really smart of Justin that when he landed the first combo that he didn't use the Ultra and saved it for later. That intimidation factor, that worry factor that you keep in the back of your opponent's head opens up so many opportunities for you and allows you to get away with so much more stuff. And that's what makes it important. So that's why you have to think about, you know, the killing blow. Marvel, this happens a lot of times too. You'll hit 0 in a combo. Let's say you throw 0. And then you start going into this big combo. And then a lot of times people will go for resets as opposed to trying to hit him with the super. Because they know the super is not going to kill 0. And it doesn't matter if you drain 0 down to this much life. If he has this much life or this much life, he can kill your whole team. It does not matter. So wasting your meter to drain 0 from here to here means absolutely nothing. You're basically wasting your time. So if you drain 0 halfway, you're better off going for a reset if you know your 1 meter that you have in store is not going to kill him. If you have 2 meters and you know you can kill him, of course you're going to use the meter and finish him off. But most of the time you're going to try to save your meter for that killing blow. Same thing, for example, like let's say you do a combo on an incoming third character. You only have 1 bar left, you do a good mix-up, you hit him, you don't have a meter, you don't have X Factor, you can't kill the character off. So you're not going to use a super and try to hit him because you're going to hit him with a super, use your resource, not kill him. He's going to activate level 3 X Factor and kill your entire team. Good job. So instead, what you're going to do is get a mix-up on him, go for a reset, and then try to kill him off with your super. So there's another way to think about how to use your meter properly, meter management. There is a lot to think about making sure that you can kill a character or not. So those are the 2 main sub things that you want to think about. Again, I'm going to reiterate 4 main things. You know, how much super meter you have, how much life you have, how many rounds are left, what's left on the timer. So for example, if you're Morgan and you're sitting on 4 bars if the timer is about 30 seconds left, you're just going to go ahead and astral vision all day. If you have all the time left on the clock, you're at 80 seconds and you have 4 bars, you're not going to astral vision necessarily right away. You're going to save onto them a little bit. So, those are the 4 main factors. 2 minor factors are the threat, holding on to the threat, and the ability to kill somebody. Make sure that you can finish them off. And it's kind of related to threat, but at the same time, it's also in games like Marvel, it's removing an entire character, which is a really important thing to do. And sometimes even in Street Fighter, for example, if you're going to use your super meter and hit Seth and it's not going to kill him off, he can still make a big comeback with his vortex, right? So maybe you don't want to use your meter right away to do big damage on him. Maybe you want to wait until you're sure spending that meter is going to kill him. And if he manages to kill you, you still have another round. You'll start with a bunch of meters. So those are 4 main factors, 2 sub-factors. And when I come back, I'm going to talk about external factors that can affect meter management depending on the type of game that you are playing. So we'll be right back after this break. Alright everybody, welcome back to First Attack. I'm talking about meter management here, and I've gone over some of the major factors and the minor factors. I want to talk about one last thing, and that is how this changes depending on the game that you're playing. Obviously I gave 4 main factors, and in some cases these factors don't exist. The main thing is, for example, Marvel. There are no rounds, so obviously there's nothing to consider for rounds. There's no saving the meter for the next round and such like that. So that factor is going to go away. Now it really does come down to killing blow, because basically when you kill a character, it's kind of the same thing as rounds. When I talked about making sure you use your meter to finish off the opponent, or saving your meter for the next round, etc., etc. That's kind of how you have to think about it. The example I gave, for example, with Zero. Killing him off is using your meter to end the round. And if you use your meter and you don't end the round, that's just not a good idea. It's kind of a different way to look at it. But that is definitely something to consider, games that just don't even have these rounds in the first place. Another factor that's really important to consider, and this happens in games like Persona, this is going to happen in a game like Guilty Gear and such. What about games where the meter resets every round? So in these situations, the meter management is a lot different. And you basically treat every single round now as if it's the final round. You are willing, now the timer becomes the most important thing. And, spending your meter to just kill somebody off, when they have a tiny bit of life is always going to be worth it. So it really changes the dynamic, and you'll see this, in a game like Guilty Gear. You see this currently in Persona. In between every round, you always reset the meter. So there's no point in saving your meter and not using a one more cancel, for example, or a Roman cancel in the case for Guilty Gear, to do as much damage as you possibly can. So, and then obviously in Street Fighter, you can kind of blend this together. You have the super meter. I've talked all about meter management with super meter, but the ultra combo resets after every round. There basically is no reason to not use your ultra meter if you have a really valuable place to use it. If this ultra meter is going to kill them, you're always going to use the ultra meter. Always. There's never going to be a reason why you wouldn't use the ultra meter if it's going to kill them, for example, because you're not going to have it the next round. So there's no point in trying to save it. Whereas in a game like Persona and Guilty Gear, you kind of have a little bit of opposite. It's a little bit backwards. You have the super meter that resets every round, but you have this burst that does not reset every round. So now you've got to manage your burst meter. So in a situation where you have a ton of life and you can afford to take one combo, you may just eat the combo and not burst if you're up 1 round to nothing. If you're down no rounds to 1 round, you may burst right away because you just don't even want to risk it. So burst is kind of like how super meters are in Street Fighter, and then the super meter is more like how ultra meters are. So it's really interesting. It's a really interesting dynamic with that. And it's, you know, I can't emphasize how important this meter management is. Let's talk a little bit about Cross Tekken, because it is one of the most blatant, poor uses of meter. You know, I talked about this a little bit earlier, and it drives me crazy that people do this so wrong. Because of the damage scaling in this game, you know, a lot of people use the meter for switch cancels to get this tiny amount of damage, whereas if you land, like, you see them do a combo, switch cancel, do another combo, switch cancel, to get back to the last character, and they spent 2 meters to do this much extra damage. But if they just did one combo that did this damage, now they could just land low forward in the super, which will do way more damage and cost the same amount of meter, for example. Or they're just taking away their ability to perform a switch cancel to get them out in situations where they need to change characters and such. Meter management is so important in that game, and David talked about this a little bit. He likes the way that kind of makes a little bit more of an adaptive combo system. You have to really consider how much resources everybody has before you actually just spend the meter right away. So, you know, I wish people would pay attention more to this, and I hope players take into account a little bit more about the meter management, because it's such an important factor in the game, in all the fighting games. And, you know, I talked about game differences, and one of the games that I talked about that I have not mentioned yet is a game, Tekken Tag 2. Obviously, in that game, there is no meter. So that's why I've actually mentioned in a couple of the Tekken episodes that Tekken Tag 2 is so intriguing to me, because fighting games is a lot about resource management to me. And with Tekken Tag 2, they've introduced that whole thing about red meter and rage, right? Red life and rage. It's not really a super meter thing, but there's a lot of different actions that you can take that will take away one or the other, or give the opponent rage and stuff like that. So there actually has been implemented into Tekken a little bit concept of this resource management. You have to think about using your rage meter or your recoverable health. Like, for example, you know, if you're about to die, you're going to sacrifice your recoverable health to do a tag, you know, to get your partner to dive in and basically save yourself, right? But you obviously lose a huge amount of resource. You know, you're going to do these tag combos to push the opponent into the corner, but you're going to give your opponent rage. You know, these kind of little things you have to think about in Tekken Tag 2, and that's what actually makes me really, you know, I love that factor in that game. It creates a little mini story, and when you watch fighting games, if you remember, there was one episode of UltraChen where I talked about it, where I said I like that about Tekken because it adds subplots to the game. And when me and David do commentary a lot of the times, that's what we're looking at. We're always looking at how much meter this person has, how much ultra and all this stuff. There's all these little sub-stories to tell about fighting games based on resources. And it's absolutely one of my favorite things about fighting games. And once you start paying attention to that, when you watch fighting games, it becomes such a different story. You know, side tangent, a lot of people, coaching seems to have become a thing in the fighting game community. A lot of people coach. Nobody seems to mind it so much anymore. But the interesting thing is, the few times that I've coached players, like live, while they're playing, the number one thing I always do is tell people how much meter they have and how much meter their opponent has. Because that's how important it is. Meter is so important. It tells so many stories. So a lot of times when I'm coaching a player, I'll be like, he has 2 meters, watch out for uppercut FADC. Oh, he has 3 meters, watch out for this. Oh, he has 1 bar, be careful of EX drill through your fireball, and stuff like that. And that's how important meter is. And I'm hoping, you know, the main goal that I have with this episode is that I hope I can convey to other people how important meter is, and so that they stop playing this game where, like, I have a meter EX fireball, or I have a meter uppercut FADC. You know, there are times where if I have a lot of life and I go for a wake-up uppercut, even if I have the meter to FADC it, I won't. I'll just let them punish me if they manage to block it, you know, because I have life meter. And I hope people take that and start thinking about meter a little bit more. And also, when you watch matches, start paying attention to how much meter both of the players have, and start understanding how that tells the story. With Cammy, for example, whether I have 4 meters, 3 meters, 2 meters, or 1 meter, there's a completely different thing that I'm going to be fishing for to kill you with my Ultra combo to make a comeback. If I have 1 bar, I'm going to try to beat a crouch tech with an EX dive. If I have 2 bars, that's an uppercut, backdash, FADC. If I have no bars, I'm going for a counter hit, low fierce. You know, etc., etc. These are things that you want to pay attention to because they are also keys to tell you what your opponent is going to do. Not only managing your own meter, but paying attention to your opponent's meter. If I see a Cammy with no meter and I have a gigantic lead over her, I know she's going for that counter hit crouch fierce. So I'm not going to try to touch as many buttons when she's in that counter hit crouch fierce range. I'm going to be careful of those things. So in a way, meter management also works on looking at your opponent's resources. Once you start getting good at managing your meter, then you will also be able to understand how your opponent wants to use their meter, and it'll help you understand what you can get away with a little more. And in situations, like I said, with Ryu, if I'm in the corner, if Ryu is in the corner, I know, and he has 2 bars, I'll play carelessly. I'll throw more fireballs at him, or I'll do things that are punishable by EX Fireball, because I want him to hit me with an EX Fireball. If he hits me with an EX Fireball, then he can't uppercut FADC me. But if I know my opponent's smart, then he's not going to do that, and that gives me the leeway to be a little more aggressive with him in the footsies game and not worry about him throwing an EX Fireball at me, and so on and so forth. So that's about all I have to cover today. Guys, stick around. After this episode is over, David will be back with level 3 focus, and we're unfortunately the Zangief the grand finals footage from yesterday is not on YouTube yet. So you did get? Oh, okay, never mind. We did get the footage. Okay, so we're good to go. So stick around. He's gonna go over that super epic Justin versus Snake Eyes match from yesterday at the 25th anniversary LA qualifier tournament. Seriously, like one of the most intense matches I've ever been a part of. So stick around for that, guys, and thank you for tuning in to First Attack.